So moving over to video number 2 now. So now I'm going to be talking about an article that Judy Singer, an interview with Judy Singer. So the article is in Psychology Today, and the article is written by someone called Amy S.F. Lutz, who I think is the parent of a severely autistic child, and the article is entitled "The Concept of Neurodiversity is to Increase Acceptance." Now, this article also has received a lot of criticism from the neurodiversity movement. Some people are saying it's a terrible article. The main reason for that, obviously, as it will become apparent, is that Judy Singer, who was interviewed by Amy S.F. Lutz, has basically said the neurodiversity movement has become a cult. And that it and that it has it's completely different to what she envisaged when she coined the term neurodiversity. I agree with Judy Singer on this point. I do think that the neurodiversity movement is very cultish, and it's very, very tribal. So let's see what this article had to say anyway. So it begins by talking about how, as I've already mentioned in the other video, in 1998, Australian sociologist Judy Singer coined the term neurodiversity in a thesis documenting the emergence of a new disability and social movement led by and for mildly, I use that in inverted commas because that's a controversial term, that's what it says in the article, so mildly affected autistic people such as her own mother and daughter. It seems as though Judy Singer's entire family has been diagnosed autistic, including herself. Obviously not the type of autism I've got, but she said neurodiversity may be essential for cultural stability, just in the same way that biodiversity is essential to ecosystem stability. Not entirely sure what she means by cultural stability. I guess she would have explained that in her thesis, but I can't really be bothered to go and read that. So her proposal collided with the nascent autism self-advocacy movement to create a cultural phenomenon. But neurodiversity has morphed into what Singer calls a Pollyanna ideology that bears little resemblance to the movement that she launched. I do, by the way, think it's rather grandiose of Singer to claim she launched the movement. In my understanding, that the movement pre-existed her, and that she simply wrote about it in a thesis. And obviously that thesis and putting a name to it may well have kind of further propagated the movement and made it go a bit more viral, shall we say. But I think actually the movement would have been there regardless of her input. I just think that's rather grandiose. She does come across as a bit grandiose, this Singer, I have to say. No, I don't think it was her responsibility to get to... I don't think she launched the movement. Seriously, I just do not think she did. But she's their self-professed leader. Although apparently the movement is actually leaderless. That's what the neurodiversity movements often say. But I think Judy Singer likes to think she's their leader. She's not. Just a grandiose thing. So she thinks that it's morphed into what Singer calls a Pollyanna ideology that bears little resemblance to the movement she launched. I was very clear, she says, in my thesis that I was only talking about Asperger's. That is, people who have normal to high intelligence. That seems again rather kind of a simplistic view of Asperger's, because it was clear from early on when Asperger's was first talked about back in the day, and obviously Asperger's no longer exists as an official diagnosis, but back in the day, it was understood that although some people with Asperger's were very, very intelligent, in inverted commas, well, what does intelligence mean? That's why I'm using inverted commas. There were some people with Asperger's very, very intelligent. Actually, some people with Asperger's had learning disabilities, so you could actually have Asperger's and have a learning disability. That did not mean you couldn't have Asperger's. The main criterion for Asperger's was that the person had normal, in inverted commas, language development. That was the main thing. So that the person would have spoken within normal kind of normal window of time, shall we say. But clinicians tended to use Asperger's rather kind of as they saw fit, really. They would often apply it simply to someone who at that point in time was pretty verbal, and without the profound intellectual disabilities that you can sometimes see in other types of autism. But it didn't negate having a mild learning disability, actually. So not all people with Asperger's are extremely intelligent. That's a myth, and I think one that Singer is unfortunately not exactly helping here. I mean, in my own case, verbally, yeah, I'm highly intelligent, if you want to call it that. I personally don't. I think that intelligence is more than your ability to be verbal. That's just one type of intelligence, so I'm using it in inverted commas because I'm critical of the whole concept of intelligence anyway, but you know what I mean. Highly verbal. But actually, non-verbally, my IQ, non-verbally, is in the intellectually disabled range. As a child, that was below 60, which is part of the reason why I was assessed as having special educational needs when I was at school, because I had quite severe learning challenges, despite my high verbal intelligence. So that's to say, clearly, not all people with Asperger's have a global high intelligence, and a lot of them do have learning difficulties, or even learning disability, or even a global learning disability. Yeah, so that's not correct, what Singer says there. Yeah, she talks about here the brainy but socially inept nerds. So they're the type of people that she basically is including in her concept of neurodiversity. And she says that people with Asperger's are both qualitatively and quantitatively different from profound impairments of classic autism. Well, yes, I agree. I mean, you know, I am, although I'm not in her extremely mild Asperger group, my difficulties are very severe, and I've got very severe disability, and I would say my autism affects me very severely. But, you know, I'm miles apart from someone who can't speak, who wears nappies and needs 24/7, you know, assistance. That's a completely different disability to what I have. It's not comparing like with like, really, but in the same way, I'm completely different to these socially inept but brainy nerds, and people like Judy Singer. I'm miles apart from her as well. I'd love to be able to do what she does, and I can't because I'm really disabled like that, so I can't do it. She says here, I can't speak for severe autism. Yes, that's true. She can't speak for severe autism, but she asked severe autism meaning those, you know, who are I think in what she means here, those who can't speak and with very profound intellectual disabilities. But she also can't speak for people with severe verbal autism. I would actually say, yeah, there is such a thing as severe verbal autism. It's different to severe non-verbal autism, completely different. But I do think there is such a thing as severe verbal autism, and by that I would include people who really struggle to relate to others, who have really severe executive function impairments, who need others to support them, who can't really look after themselves properly without support. There is such a thing as severe verbal autism, and I think it needs more acknowledgement, actually. And I think that this type of autism can make you particularly vulnerable because you don't look disabled. That's the issue. People don't see me as disabled because I can talk so well, but actually I am very disabled, and it really worries me, actually, the future, because despite the fact I can talk, and I think I still have all the communication and other challenges of autism, which get particularly worse under stress. So I could actually be in a really severe situation and not be able to reach out for others because I'm absolutely paralysed by stress. So I rely on other people to check in on me, and that is scary. And as I get older, that can get worse. So seriously, verbal autism can actually make you very vulnerable. Possibly, you know, like those who are like non-verbal are incredibly vulnerable, but everyone knows they're vulnerable, and they're obviously disabled, and people look out for them. Obviously, there have been abuses of that, as you can see in the care home scandals, and obviously, you know, and because they are very vulnerable, they can't speak out and stuff. But generally, as a rule, people know they're vulnerable, and they're obviously disabled. But when you can't, when you can speak and you appear, you know, to have it sorted because you could talk, because that's often what people judge based on how well you come across, you could still be severely disabled for other reasons. And actually even more vulnerable because people just assume you're okay because you can talk. Anyway, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. So yeah, so autism isn't a unitary condition, which it clearly isn't, obviously, I agree. But advocates now reject this, that those who are mildly affected shouldn't speak for the severely impacted, and they may also be against the use of severe, saying that there is no such thing. Yeah, indeed, a lot of those in the neurodiversity movement do argue that there's no such thing as severe, and they say autism is all the same, and they tend to talk more about like support needs and stuff like that, but so some of them do claim, to be fair, some of them do claim that there are differences, but they at the same time seem to think that it's all one condition, and that those who are the most able automatically understand what it's like for those who are more disabled, and I think that's an absolute load of crap. Like, I'm not going to pretend I know what it's like to be non-verbal, banging my head against the wall. I don't care for someone who's non-verbal. You know, I leave it up to the parents to talk about that, because I don't know what that's like. I'm not going to talk for them. Yeah, we might share certain features, but at the end of the day, it's completely different to the challenges I face. I can only talk about my own experiences, and people very, very, you know, well, I say people very similar to me, but even then I can't really talk about their experiences, because only they know what it's like for them. It's autism is like highly specific. I think trying to talk about other people and talking for them is actually really arrogant, and can actually mean that you actually end up misrepresenting them, essentially. For those who can't speak, it's their parents and those who know them well who need to advocate for them, I think. Now, interestingly, by the way, Singer has described a new term, which he's coined a new term, called neurorealism, which is meant to be evidence-based, and this is to counter the Pollyanna neurodiversity. Pollyanna, by the way, if you don't know what that means, it basically means extremely sort of positive, kind of like, oh, it's all right, rose-tinted after the books, Pollyanna books. Yes, this demands, so neurorealism demands that we aim to meet the needs of everyone. And Amy Lutz says that as a parent who is constantly being told by the neurodiversity advocates that a severely autistic son really can live independently, work, etc. Oh yeah, by the way, that's another thing that neurodiversity advocates often do. I've seen this a lot on social media. They will claim that those who are intellectually disabled, autistics, and can't speak, that somehow one day they will miraculously be able to come out of that and be able to work, and all they need is, you know, just a bit of time, and how, you know, who knows how many of them later on might be able to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, sure, there are some amazing success stories. Certainly, but it's not really very helpful for parents of profound, you know, of kids who really have these really extreme challenges to be told that when it's just so unrealistic. Yes, so Amy Lutz says that the idea of neurorealism sounds like an idea way overdue. It's not doing anyone any favours by skewing a devastating impairments behind the celebratory facade of identity politics. And yes, I agree. I completely agree with Amy Lutz there. Not doing anyone any favours by obscuring the devastating impairments behind celebratory facade of identity politics. I completely agree. Okay, so thank you for watching.